Before we start this video, a large thank you to Happy Hierarchy, Vasily75, Philip, and Snorlax for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And as always, an immense thank you to Haloburner for their continued support to the channel this month on Patreon. It is sincerely appreciated, my friend, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, and today we're going to start our Ashes of War system. So what is an Ash of War for those who don't know? Well, let's take the broadsword for example. You can use any weapon. I've just selected this one to give you a visual representation. If I press the right bumper, I'm going to perform a light attack. If I press the right trigger, I'm going to go into a heavy attack action. And if I press the left bumper, if I have two of these equipped, the same weapon class, I'm going to do a dual attack. But if it's just the one weapon in my offhand, I'm going to block. Now, if I press the left trigger, I'm going to perform an Ash of War. This is like a special attack. And the key notes about this is it can be swapped out for other Ashes of War. And this means it changes the action performed when you swap it, and this action is saved to that weapon. So this is both an item and also an action. So earlier in the series, we made the light attack action and the heavy/charge attack action. This is going to function as something a little bit different. It's going to both be an action while also being an item, because you can change these as you progress through the game and swap them out on a lot of your items. So to keep it super simple, you could have one on your broadsword that causes you to lunge forward, and maybe another one that causes you to spin around or something, just variations in the attack itself. So in this video, we're going to put in the bones of this system, and we're going to add the beginning of the Parry Ash of War. This will tie in nicely to our system that we just made that allows us to do a riposte. So in the end, it will look like this, and this again is my project in Nephilim, and this is how it's going to perform. Okay guys, the first thing we want to do is go into our scripts folder, go into our items, and we're going to create a new script. It's going to be called, a folder. It's going to be called Weapon Arts. Well, I'm mixing up my games. Ashes of War. I'm thinking of Dark Souls. So it's called Ashes of War. It's like ruins will always be called souls to me. Go to create, C# script, Ash of War, and let's open that up. So let's delete the start and update functionality as is per tradition. Let's drop in our namespace. Mine is SG. And let's make this derive from the item class so we get some of our item stuff. This is another feature we can give it an icon, a description, so when we open up the menu to swap these out, there's some more information on them. So let's make a new header for costs. We're going to make an int for focus points. We actually don't have that system yet. Focus points cost, I'll say defaultly 20, and we'll make one for the stamina cost, also defaultly 20. You can change these obviously depending on what your weapon, or sorry, Ash of War is going to cost, but having a default value is always nice so it's not free. Let's make a public virtual void attempt to perform action. Let's make it require a player manager, so only a player can do this. Let's call the variable rather player performing action. And let's leave that blank for now. Let's also make a helper function, virtual void again. It's going to be a virtual bool. Can I use this ability? If you want to call it, can I use this Ash of War? You can. Whatever makes more sense to you. And also make it require a player manager. I'm also going to call that player performing action. So I'm going to return this at false on the base class, because you're always going to override this because it's going to be very different depending on your Ash of War. Maybe most of them will share some similarities, but you might want to check for a few different things specifically for certain ones. Let's also put a weapon class variable up here for usable weapon classes. Now this is not important at this very moment, but when you're actually trying to equip these to weapons, you don't want to be able to equip, say, a parry on an ultra greatsword, or maybe you do. But what I'm trying to say is certain Ashes of War will only be applicable to certain weapon classes, so this is how we're going to sort that out when you're actually equipping them from a menu. So let's call this header Ashes of War information in case you want to add something else to it as well. And that looks good. So I'm going to throw a debug.log here in attempt to perform action. I'm just going to say performed, so we did do it. Okay, so let's save this now. And right now, pause the video and go make an input for left trigger. You know how to do it. Pause it. Don't watch me, and just go make the input and make it so we're actually setting up the left trigger input. And if you want to take a whack at actually calling the weapon art or Ash of War information, pause the video and try to do the whole thing if you'd like. That'd be pretty cool. Nice little challenge for you. And don't worry, because if you don't set it up correctly, or if you want to see how I did it, maybe you like my way better, then you can use mine. But We're going to use scriptable objects. It's going to go onto your weapon. That's the hint. So if you want to pause the video and take an attempt, you should definitely do that right now. Okay, let's go to the player input manager. Let's go to the trigger inputs. Let's copy right trigger input, change it to left trigger input, paste it. And let's go to on enable where we set it up. We have our nice comments here, so it's very clear where triggers are. Let's copy the right trigger and not the hold. You don't need the hold right now. For some weapon or Ashes of War, you're probably going to need the hold in the future. So change this from RT to LT. Let's go to handle RT input, the function, and let's paste it, and let's change it to LT. Make sure you're changing every RT to LT, or else something won't work, and you probably won't know why. Might scratch your head for a minute before you come back and realize it. I've done that many a time. So we're going to not really use this at all, how this is set up. It's going to be very different, as I'm trying to say. So we're going to set up a helper function, because in Elden Ring, and I'm not entirely sure, so I'm going to check after this video. It's been a little bit. I know that depending on how your weapons are equipped, you might perform the Ash of War in the weapon in your left hand, or you might prioritize the one in your right hand. So I'm going to, before I construct that function fully, really do some research and dive in and do a bunch of testing. I have a good idea of it in my head, but I want to be certain. So we're going to make a weapon item variable, weapon performing Ash of War, and we're going to get that by making a function on our player combat manager called select weapon to perform Ash of War. So make that public. Here it is. And again on the player combat manager. And all this is going to do is decide which weapon we're going to use, our left hand or our right hand weapon, and we're going to do that Ash of War. So I'm going to put it to do. But for now, just to get the bones of the system working, we're going to manually select one ourselves just via hard code. And since we're doing parry, we're always going to use the one in our offhand. So we'll say the selected weapon is equal to player.playerinventorymanager.current left hand weapon. So again, next video, this is going to basically do some logic, and this should be a public weapon item, not a void, sorry, and we're going to return the selected weapon. In the next video, we're going to make this select either the left or the right weapon, but for now, we'll just keep it super simple, hard-coded, so we make sure the system is actually working. So, back over here, we also want to set the character's hand. We can do that in the helper function. So, since this is going to be the left hand, we're going to say set character action hand false. Alright. We have our hand set, we have our weapon, and now we're going to pass this weapon, and we're going to perform the Ash of War through that weapon, which doesn't exist yet because it does not have a variable. So I'm just going to put this stuff here to get rid of the errors. It's not important though, don't worry about this right now, not at all important. So let's go over now to the weapon item itself, and let's go down and add an Ash of War action. So this is going to be public Ash of War, and then I'm going to call this Ash of War action. Cool. Going to go back here, just temporarily get rid of the errors by putting this right here, but again, we're going to change this in minutes, don't worry about it. Let's also call handle LT inputs under handle all inputs. So over here, handle all inputs. I'm just going to put this right below the right bumper, left bumper, right trigger, etc., etc. So they're all kind of in the same place. All right, cool. Looks good. Let's save that. Let's go back to the project now, and I'm going to create a new C# script. This is going to be the Parry Ash of War. So Parry, nope, not Parry, Ash of Parry, Parry Ash of War. Save. Let's delete the start and update functionality. Go into this now, drop our namespace as is per tradition. Let's make this derived from our newly created Ash of War class. Now, what do we need here? Well, the first thing to do is create an asset helper menu so we can actually create a scriptable object. So let's do create asset menu, menu name. Let's make a new section here for Ashes of War. So it'll be items / Ash of War / Parry. All right, cool. So what do we need to do now to get this up and running? Well, first things first, let's drop in some animations and create a folder for our data. So let's go into items, create a folder for Ashes of War. Let's create this new Ash of War for Parry. Just going to call it Parry. I'm going to leave all these values the same. They don't matter right now. Usable weapon classes. So right now we only have medium shield. Doesn't matter too much though because we're not selecting these from a menu yet, but you can set it up. Sure, focus point cost is going to be 0. Let's go over to our world item database. Almost forgot. What we need to do now is add a section for our Ashes of War so we can get them via their item ID. So I would copy any of these lists here and make it into Ash of War. So change the type to Ash of War, the name to Ashes of War, the header, all that good stuff. And let's also get the search function that grabs this stuff and just set that up as well. So again, copy any of these. They're all identical. And let's also add it to our list so it gets an item ID. So for each, we're going to say item in Ashes of War. We're going to say items.add item. And then you can give it the ID via down here. All right, so grab this function here, get hand equipment by ID, and it's a hand equipment that becomes Ash of War. And I'm going to name it get Ash of War by ID. So we're going to search the Ashes of War first or default. I'll change this from equipment to item. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, but it just makes more sense to me, so I'm going to do it. We're still getting it by the item ID, so that's always the same. You can save that. All right, let's jump back here now, and let's add on to this. Let's add in the Parry Ash of War, so it's actually in that list. Okay, cool. Let's go to the medium shield now, and let's go in and put this. Oh, right, I forgot to do that. We haven't changed that to an Ash of War. No, did I set that up? Okay, jump back to the weapon item script. This is supposed to be Ash of War, not weapon item action. That's my bad. And now we can set this up over in the player input manager. So let's save that. Go over here now. It's going to give you an error. Now, instead of referencing this directly, we're going to reference the weapon that we've already gotten from our help function, and then we're going to reference the Ash of War. Then we're going to say dot attempt to perform action, and we pass our player. So pretty simple. It works pretty much identically the same. It's just also an item as well as an action. Now go back into your weapon again, set that up like so. You can just drop in there for now via the inspector, and I didn't have this set to left trigger, so I made that mistake. Gonna save that. Now, let's go over and go to our medium shield. You can see here I have the Parry Ash of War, so if I hit the left trigger, performed. Okay, cool, working as intended. But let's actually add on some more logic now and make it a bit more unique to Parry itself and make it kind of do an animation. So let's override attempt perform action, and let's override can I use this ability. So let's think now about these two functions. So if I can't use this ability, I'm going to return. You can throw a debug log if you want, so it has a message letting you know you can't. So you could say debug.log cannot perform Ash of War, and then you can just do a return here. So what under this function can I use this ability will we do to check to see if we can actually perform this? A good first one to always check is your stamina. So basically, if your character is out of stamina, you don't want to allow them to perform this Ash of War. So we could say if player performing action dot player network manager dot current stamina dot value is less than or equal to 0, then you just want to simply return. So you can do the same thing too for focus points, but we don't have a focus point system right now, and we're using Parry, which isn't going to cost any anyway, so we're going to skip that one for now, but this would also be reinserted. You know what, I'm just going to move my debug message here, and I'll give it reason every time. So cannot perform Ash of War, reason out of stamina, else return true. Save that. Okay, let's go over to our Ash of War under the base class, and let's add two new functions. They're going to be protected virtual voids. We're going to call one deduct stamina and one deduct focus points costs. Now you can put these under one umbrella if you want, and it could be just deduct costs, but in case you want to have some weird interaction that only overrides one of these, I like separating them, and I do have those weird interactions sometimes in Nephilim, and if you're doing anything that's kind of outside of the norm, it's always just good to separate these in their own individual things. So most of the time we can put these as the simple logic of player performing action, player network manager, current stamina dot value minus equals stamina cost. You can do the same thing for focus points. So you'd only change this, or you'd only override this, if you want to change that logic, but it's probably going to be universally the same for most, if not all, of your Ashes of War. Now, if I can't use this ability, I'm going to return. If I can, cool, I pass the checks. I will deduct both my focus points and my stamina by calling our new two functions, and then I'll actually get down to actually performing the action itself. Now, before I move on, actually, we can make a lot more checks in this can I use ability, so let's do that. So let's make the last one return true if it passes everything else. So right above stamina, I'm going to check if we're jumping, for example. I don't want to be able to perform a parry while I'm jumping in the air. Maybe you do, but I don't want to in my situation, so I'm going to say return false. And again, if you want to, you can add a debug.log message here too, just giving you the reason why you can't. All right, so what's another check we can do? We can do a few more. You can kind of use another one too for not being grounded. That's a good one. You don't want to allow this Ashes of War to be performed if you're not grounded. Again, maybe you do with certain Ashes of War, but this one specifically, I definitely do not want to do that. So I'm going to run that against the player locomotion manager is grounded. And we're going to say if we're not grounded, we're going to return. And another very basic one is I don't want to allow the player to perform an Ash of War if we're already performing an action. This is a very umbrella bool, as I'm sure you know. If you get damaged and you're locked in a damage animation, this triggers. If you're already attacking, this triggers. This is just a general I'm doing something else check here, and we don't want to allow this to go through if we are. All right, cool. That looks good. I can save that now. It's probably enough. I'm sure you can add more to that if you have any in your project specifically. So I'm going to make a private void now, choose Parry type, and this one's very unique to this Ash of War. Basically, depending on your weapon, you're going to perform parries at a varying speed that will be a little bit different than one another. So perform parry type based on weapon is what I'll change this to actually. So we need a bit of information here now. Let's call this in this function. And the first piece of information we need to know before we move on is what weapon class we are using. So I'll make a little comment here. Smaller weapons perform faster parries than larger weapons. So we need to somehow deduce the weapons. Let's go back to our player combat manager. Let's go to the helper function. And what we want to do is change now the current weapon we're using, the ID. So we'll say player. We're going to go to the player network manager, .current weapon being used, .values equal to, and we pass the ID of the selected weapon. And then from there, our current weapon being used on our player combat manager updates, and then we can actually get some information on this weapon. So let's go to enums first though, and let's add another weapon class. I want to add small shields. We have medium shields, so I need one that will allow us to perform a faster parry. So let's save that. Let's go back over now to our weapons in our data. Let's duplicate our medium shield. I'm going to make one for small shield, and I'll just change this to light shield in the weapon class. I'm going to change the item name because it was incorrectly placed as straight sword. I'll do that for both. And I'll just show you my workflow here of how I added another shield. I always like to keep one weapon in each class as my medium. So this is the weapon I base all others off of. It is a grounding point. So I do that too for all weapons in my project. For example, the straight sword in my project is my medium speed weapon. So fast is based off of that, and slow is based off of that. So let's drag in our medium shield here, and you can see we have our pivot set up. And we want to put the handle of our new shield exactly where the handle is of this old shield that we already got set up. This will save us some work. So you can see here, this is a little handle, you know. You don't want to go up here and just like twist it like this because we already have the weapon pivot. So what you want to do is just duplicate this original one and then delete the weapon model here and reset the weapon pivot. Now drop your new model under the weapon pivot again, and then you want to change the weapon pivot to match so the handles line up, and that will save you a lot of heartache, and then your shield will function just like your other shield. So cool, looks good to me. When I got that set up, I'm just gonna slap a material on it. What is the material called? There we go. Okay, it's called Fantasy Hero. And now I'm going to change this from weapon medium shield to weapon small shields. Don't forget to set up your damage collider, all that stuff. And then you can save it as a prefab like you've done over here, just like that. Cool, looks good. You can then drag it in here to the weapon model prefab of your new weapon. And again, don't forget your damage collider. I did forget mine. I'm just going to paste that down here. See how the size of that is. That's a bit quite large. I'm going to change that real quick off video. There we go. All done. Save that. Delete this now. Cool, now we have different weapons. Now let's go to perform parry type based on weapon. We're going to make a local variable called weapon item, weapon being used. And we're going to get this by passing, we're going to make this function require our player manager. Pass that. We're going to get it now from the player performing action.player combat manager.current weapon being used. And remember, the helper function already sets that for us. Then we'll do a switch statement based on the weapon class of the weapon being used. And then if we have a medium shield, we can perform a it's going to be a heavier parry, and a light shield will perform a fast parry. So you can do a medium parry here if you want to, but technically medium shields, since they're the heaviest shield that can parry, this would be your slow parry, not your medium parry. And your light shield would actually be your medium parry, and then your fist or your fist weapons, like your KDS, would be your fast parry. But just to keep this simple, I want to see the contrast. I'll do slow for medium shield and fast for light shield, just so we can see the difference. Now, if you are a patron, all of these animations are in the description of this video, and if you have the shield pack, they're going to go live, but Unity's currently being weird and it's auto-flagging my assets, so I got to manually submit it, so it's going to take them a couple weeks. But if you don't want to wait that long, and you own the asset, just message me or at me in the Discord server, say, hey Seb, I own your shield asset, I don't want to wait for the update, can I have the Parry animations right now? And I will send them to you. So if you're a patron, though, you don't need to do that. Just check the description of this video. They're already uploaded there. You can have them. So we got fast parry. I'm just going to change the name of these to fast parry, medium parry, slow parry, and parry release. What's parry release? Well, we're going to call it parry land. It's going to abruptly play this cool animation if we land the parry. That'll make it feel a lot more impactful. So as you see in the beginning of the video, just go back and rewind. When I land the parry, the animation kind of plays upwardly. You probably don't even notice it, but it's actually changing to a new animation. We're going to do that. So we got fast, medium, slow, and land. Let's make these all go back to the empty state. We're not going to worry about land for now. We're just going to set it up so we're actually playing the animation. Let's save that. Now, don't forget to go and add your new weapon to your world item database, or you won't be able to use it. I'm in the weapon, or the game here now. You can see, boom, small shield is playing fast parry. Cool. Switch my medium shield is playing slow parry. So again, one more time. Small shield, boom, fast parry. And again, I go to my medium shield, boom, slow parry. All right, so before we go also, if you go to your equipment window, you can actually open up your equipment, and then if you click the equipment slot again, it just kind of reloads the weapons in your inventory over and over again. Now, this isn't actually duplicating anything. Some Patreon brought this up in the Discord server. This just isn't a finished feature, so we're going to go ahead and finish that right now so it's fixed. Let's go to the Player UI Equipment Manager. Let's make a void for Disable Equipment buttons until new equipment is selected, or alternatively, we can just say toggle equipment buttons. We can pass a true or false if you want to toggle it. So let's just call it that instead and make it a lot more simplistic. So let's make a bool here for if they're toggled, and then we need to, of course, get the buttons because we don't have them as local variables. Now you can make it a serializable button variable and then get them all in the inspector, but I'm just going to make mine private because if you remember a few videos ago, we actually fetch these by using the image itself and getting a component parent. So you can see here I have all the button variables set up as private, and now we can go down here on awake. Let's call it an awake method and let's fetch these. So we're going to do the exact same way we did before in the code. We can say right hand slot 01 button is actually equal to right hand slot 01 get component in parent because the button component sits on the parent object of the image. Do the same thing for all of them. It will look like this. And if you want to, you can come down and replace these in select last selected button or selected equipment slot and just replace these with the new variables that you have instead of fetching them again like this live. It saves a little bit of memory. Not too important though, but you can do it if you want to. So under toggle equipment buttons, we can say right hand slot 01 button is enabled is equal to is enabled. And then the second one also equal to is enabled, and do it with all these and it will look like this. So the idea here is when we open the equipment manager, you want to say toggle equipment buttons true. But when we're actually selecting a piece of equipment, let's also move this up here. When we're selecting a piece of equipment, we don't want to actually be able to access these buttons until we're done. So we can just disable that by going over to load equipment inventory and putting toggle equipment buttons and changing that to false. Now, what do we do if we don't have any weapons in the inventory? Well, or items for that matter. Let's get to that. What we want to do is if your weapon count is less than or equal to 0, your item count, you want to disable the equipment inventory window and then return, and you want to reactivate your buttons. And in the future, we can send the player a pop-up message here saying like, hey, you don't have any of the applicable item in your inventory, so we're not opening up the inventory. Or you can open it up to an empty inventory slot if you want. That's entirely up to you, but I just like basically not allowing it to open if there's nothing there at all, just to save the player some time. So we can call now toggle the equipment buttons and set them to active as true. Make sure you put both of these before refresh menu. And I'm just going to put this to-do message right here like so. And there we go. Now, do the same thing I've done here for all of your inventory loads. So this is the weapon inventory. Do the same thing for, say, your head inventory, and then your body inventory, and then your leg inventory, and your hand inventory. And remember, it always goes above this refresh weapon menu here, or refresh menu. And just you want to close out the inventory window, and then also reactivate the buttons, at which point we're going to auto-select them after the refresh happens. So if I go back into the project here now, you'll actually see that if I try to load this, you're going to get an error. So let me just show you actually. We'll go into the game here. And if I press equipment window, boom, it says null reference. But you're saying, wow, we just assigned that. And some of you probably know what's going on here. You can see here we're assigning on awake, but the thing is, it actually won't get it on awake if the component itself is inactive. So to remedy that, it's very simple. All you want to do is pass true inside these brackets here, and that will search inactive game objects for the component, regardless of their being active in the scene. So this is very useful for something like this. We can save this, and then we don't need to activate these buttons live. Now, last thing we want to do is, after we were reselecting a button, close out our inventory window. We don't want to keep it open when it's empty, and also reactivate our buttons. This is again under select last selected equipment slot, so re-enable our buttons and close our inventory window. Now, if we go into the game, press start here, go to equipment window, boom. You can see I'm equipping a weapon. I can't actually go back to my equipment slots until I'm in a selection. Boom, equip the weapon, and then I can change it out, and I can't go back, and it won't actually duplicate these anymore when you load the inventory. Cool, working as intended. There we go, guys. Now in the next video, we're actually going to make it so the parry will trigger a state, and if something is attacking us and their attack can be parried, we're actually going to make it so they play the getting parried animation, and we're going to set up some more stuff on our weapon art system, such as deciding which weapon art, sorry, I keep saying weapon art, which Ash of War should play. So we have a good set of bones here now for this. I encourage you, before next week, to expand upon this yourself. Maybe set up a UI where you can swap these out, figure out how you would save these to each weapon. That one's a bit more tricky. And maybe set up a couple more Ashes of War for different weapon types specifically and assign them to those weapons. Alright everybody, I hope you all have a lovely weekend. Thank you for joining me again this weekend, and a special thank you as always to my patrons. You have my immense gratitude. It's because of each and every one of you I get to keep doing this, and I love doing this, so thank you very much. I will see you guys next week when we will continue on to the next part of our Ash of War system and our parry specifically.